get your attention. Hey, first of all, thanks for coming out, everybody. It's good to see everyone here. As you might know, I really just wanted to have this time of gathering together as students who are about to transition into a different stage of life, a different rhythm of life, and really just start opening that conversation of what's the other side like, what's in the great beyond, and really just kind of starting to think about, okay, what is my life now? What are my rhythms now? Whether that's with walk with God, whether it's in your job, just your regular habits of your life, and thinking, okay, what's it going to be like then, and how can I start thinking and be preparing for that now? And so I'm really excited about tonight. Again, as I said, we're going to do 3 of these this semester. This is in February. We'll do 1 in March, and we'll do 1 in April after that. And I'll let you know the dates of those at the end of this. But yeah, just kind of having these spaced out conversations to help us prepare for this transition. So let me open us up in some prayer, and then we'll continue. God, we're grateful for your work, Father, and how you call us to follow you. And God, we thank you for the rhythms of life that we find ourselves in, and how you are consistent through all of them. God, it doesn't matter what we find ourselves going through. We know that your faithfulness is true and is great, God. And so thank you for that. We pray, God, your blessing upon this night. Thank you just for how you have worked, God, in each person's life here. And we want to honor your name, build each other up tonight. God, it's for the glory of your name. And so we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, these are my friends Nicole and Steven. Can I give them a hand for joining us tonight? They've both been friends for several years, and I'm really excited for them to be able to share just some of their experiences in going through this transition. So basically, I'll just kind of trade off. I'll ask a question, and then y'all can just trade off giving answers, whoever wants to go first. But first of all, just tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you go to school, that kind of thing. So Nicole, why don't you start us off?
My name is Nicole. I grew up in Central Texas, so Fort Hood, Killeen. My dad was in the Army, so we moved around a lot, but Fort Hood was like our main base. And then I came to UTA to study university studies with the minor in education. Not bad.
Hey, I'm Steven. I was born in Arlington and then moved to Grand Prairie about halfway through high school. Went to UTA, majored in music composition and French, with my whole minor in French, and then I now work at General Motors Financial Company.
Awesome. What was y'all's involvement in BSM? What did that look like?
I came in around my sophomore year, became a believer that year, but A-Hall, Great Hall. A lot of people were knocking on my door freshman year and taking out my trash.
That's awesome.
So I came here and became a leader at apartment on campus apartments with Steven.
Oh, awesome.
Yep, we were in the on-campus apartment group. I came to the BSM my freshman year, and then kind of used the first 2 years to soak in everything from other people and other leaders involved here. And then in my junior year, I transitioned into the leadership role and was able, through my studies and taking on a lot harder load my freshman and sophomore year, to have a lot more time to pour back into BSM in those last 2 years.
Awesome. What was a challenge maybe in that transition from being in school to being out of school? Anything come to mind?
I think being saturated in being surrounded constantly with believers, I kind of made it personally a holy huddle. I struggled with having friends who were not believers outside of the sorority I was in, and so in the real world, not that this is the real world, but you are so blessed to know so many older believers who here have sort of the same free time to disciple you, and then meet younger people coming in that you're like, hey, I want to do this thing called discipleship that the person older than you taught you. And so it was kind of all at your fingertips. So when I left, I was like, who's going to disciple me? Who am I going to disciple? And it was kind of a struggle.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I would say one of my biggest struggles in moving to the business world was, in college you have all your friends near to you, and you have a lot of time between classes or whatever, and your friends are easily accessible because you both live on a campus that's only like 2 miles across. But when you go to the business world, you have to intentionally make other people your friends, or you don't have access to those friends, and that increases more in your life later on, where you just have to be very intentional about the people you spend time with and hang on to. So, don't have all the time in the world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of it is your living situation changes.
Yeah.
So, especially if you live on campus, yeah, your living situation changes. You're not living in the same hallway as the rest of your friends, or the same building. And even if you live off campus now, you have most of your friends are coming to the same location every single day. So I think so living in an apartment, people of all ages, or living even in a house, it's even easier to be reclusive. I think, and even hard. It's more important to be intentional than getting out of that space. So yeah, I agree with that. In your job right now, what's a way that you try to live out your faith in your job right now?
I'll go first. I have certain people I know that are in different walks of life, in believing or not believing, or they're somewhat religious. One lady in particular, just knowing that she's a Christian, we try to meet up at least once a week to have a Bible study and just talk and find out how she's doing. And then also just being intentional about listening. Sometimes in the workplace, you'll find that you'll get so focused on what you're doing in your job that you'll kind of just zone out the people around you, when that's your job. As a Christian, the people around you are your job wherever you're set. So I think the important thing is just to listen, because you'll find several opportunities on how to just be a part of their life and share Christ with them.
Yeah.
I would agree. It's so easy. I teach first grade, and so it's so easy to love on the 18 kids I have in front of me. But with the women in our hallway, it's easy to be like, all right, conference time. I'm going to go make copies. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to shut myself out because I have so much to do and forget to love on them. So the team I'm on, they all proclaim to be believers. I think my biggest struggle is so many teachers think that they're going to heaven because of the noble profession. Like, what do you mean I'm going to hell? Like, I love first graders. Like, this is not an easy job. This is the most noble thing you can do. It's just, I'm Mother Teresa. And I'm like, it is not by your works. And so those are hard conversations I try to have. But like Steve said, really being intentional at going to the lunchroom at work, being encouraging, like all teachers, not all, but most of the conversation is complaining or tired or putting other people down, really trying to allow the gospel to permeate those conversations in a surrounding where most people think that they're asleep.
I was talking with our church about this recently. Sometimes the best witness you can be is by the things that you don't say, the things that you don't participate in, grumbling, complaining.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah, that's good. What's a challenge to living out your faith in your current workplace? You mentioned maybe one or two, but
It's illegal for me to share with my students.
okay, illegal to share with students.
It took me maybe my second or third year teaching for God to be like, you can talk to your staff all you want about Jesus. And I was like, you're so right, what am I doing? And so being bold in that, and like I said, not being reclusive, not being focused on the job, and forgetting that the Holy Spirit will give me words and opportunities to speak. And so serving, if there's a teacher sick and there's a meal train, just taking every opportunity to build our relationships outside of school.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
Yeah.
I would say that by the time you get into a job, most of the people that you have, college, I'm sure you've heard this from Jerry, I don't know where he went, and from Ben as well. College is one of the times where people are really questioning for the first time by themselves, without their parents' influence, what they believe and why they believe it. Once you arrive in the workforce, most of that is closed off. People know exactly what they want to believe and why they want to believe it. So it's very hard to get past that wall that they've put up because they think they know everything. So I think that's probably, I mean, you can share with people, and also just the time you have at work too. I mean, a lot of people are just there to do a job, and so you only have the little times before you start working, and then also lunchtime, and then maybe after work if you do stuff with people after work. So there's a limited amount of time, and then you have the to deal with people, be close enough and knowing what they want.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times it takes developing relationships and then maybe unwinding some of the things that people believe. Maybe as you deepen that relationship, you find out what they believe and why they believe it. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Y'all have kind of interspersed some encouragements for them, but just what's one encouragement y'all would have for these seniors?
I know that it's easy to believe the lie that you don't have a lot of time. And I'm sure you hear people say that, oh, you're in college, you have so much time. And you're like, no, I have 3 finals, or I have this. And I'm not telling you that God does not want you to be a good steward here and to work hard and study. I just remember talking to a girl, and she's like, we understand I'm a nursing major. Like, I literally have to live and breathe like nursing. But I had a best friend when I was here who was a nursing major and intentionally studied with her sorority sisters and took breaks with them and talked about Jesus. Like, you can glorify the Lord by working hard and getting your degree, but you are here for this season. And so I would encourage you to make the most of it. Come to the Friday Maples and trainings. Go out. I know that you're like, I don't understand, I need to study. I major in this, I major in that. And I don't want to be harsh, but the more college students I talk to, it sounds like they kind of major in making excuses to not share the gospel. And so, as Stephen said, so many students here are seeking or wondering or are more open to the gospel than other people that you do go into the workplace. So I would just encourage you to take every opportunity and not let the enemy say later. Like, there's no time like these 4 or 5 years. Ever.
I would also say too that in college you have a lot of time for doing kind of things that you want to pursue as well. Find people that you want to do the little things, do the jobs that nobody wants to do. Talk to the people who are older than you. Serve people, because that's a lot of how you're going to ministry, how to minister in the workplace is by doing the small things, because a lot of people don't. Paying attention to detail, being there for people.
Yeah. Awesome. That's good stuff. Can we say thanks?
Yeah.
All right, so Wesley Daniel is also here, and so he's going to come up in a second, and he'll talk to us a little bit. So a little bit of background. So I met Wes McDaniel, this is 2012, I think it was in June 2012, maybe late May. I had just graduated, and actually Gary, I was looking for a job, and so Gary sent me a text one day. He's like, hey, I just had lunch with this guy, and he has a company up in Grapevine. Sounds pretty cool. You should go check it out. I was like, okay, I'm looking for a job. And so I went up and met with Wes, and interviewed and heard about his company. And he'll tell you more about it, I'm sure, but it's called Ideal Impact, and I ended up working with them for 4 years. Awesome company that's doing amazing things for ministries and school districts all across Texas. And it was an awesome time. They not only grows companies, but he also grows people extremely well. And so I've been extremely blessed to be able to work in his company for a few years and still experience the benefits of doing that even today. And so we're really happy to have him here. And so why don't you come up, Wes?
Okay, so just a little bit about my background, who I am and my story. I grew up in Fort Worth, east side of Fort Worth, went to Carter Riverside High School, actually in UTA a long time ago. Back in '78 I graduated. So the engineering degree, and I always tell people, is one of the things, I'm the least talented human you ever met. I can't sing, dance, draw, do sports very well, kind of socially awkward. Don't know what clothes match other than that. But yeah, I think I do 4 things well. I teach God's Word, and I grow people, and I grow companies. And I learned how to make energy a valuable resource years ago. So I've started 4 organizations in my life, and they've all done well. The last one grew to 50 offices across 6 countries. And we sold it to a bigger organization and that to a bigger. So I was an executive leader in a $30 billion company that had offices in 180 countries. About 10 years ago, I really felt like God was calling me to resign my job and give back. And so January 2009, I told my wife that. And the first thing she said was, do you realize we're in a recession? And they pay you a lot of money, want you to stay there till you retire. And then she said, have you prayed about it? Have you sought wise counsel? And she knew those answers, of course. And it took me 2 hours the next morning to convince the president of the company I really was leaving. But that's where Idea Impact came from, is to make a difference in the world. And our first mission was creating $1 billion for Christian ministry. And so we work with about 650 Christian ministries across Texas. And then about 4 years ago, we really felt like God was calling us to also go to school districts. And so we added in public school districts. And we go into school districts as a Christian ministry. And a lot of people say you can't do that, but we do that. So when we go to the school board meetings, we'll explain how Christ built the company and who we are. And anyway, that's a little bit of my background. So how many of y'all are graduating this year? A lot of y'all, okay. Has anybody already graduated? So a few of y'all, okay. Some of y'all don't know. We've got about, I don't know, we've probably got close to a dozen people from BSM here that work for us now. Ben was the first one, but he started this chain of people. And then we have a bunch of others that have, like Booty was there as an intern. We had others there as interns, and so probably a lot of y'all know somebody that works for us. Probably most of y'all do, you just may not know it. So y'all are about to hit this interesting stage in life. And I think it's one of the stages a lot of times we're the least prepared for. Because every other stage in life, people give you lots of advice and lots of wisdom, and you're getting advice hopefully from people that know what they're talking about. But this next stage is called a career. And one of the things, when I was 45, I realized it had been 23 years since I started my career, and I was halfway through it. A career in the U.S. is typically about 46 years long, so it's a long time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And if you do it well, it can be great. It can be a blast. It can be a lot of fun. It's still going to be challenging and hard sometimes. You get a chance to share your faith and make an impact on lots of people, across your company and across the world. But it's just like anything else, you got to be intentional. Just like here at UTA, when you share your faith, you're intentional. And you develop ways of doing it. And a lot of the things people say you can't do, you really can do. You just got to figure out how to do it well. So, and you had some good advice from the people that talked a minute ago. But as you get into that next job, there's several things to think about first. One, your career is going to be a big part of your life. It's just a fact. It's not it's just a fact. It's a big part of your life. Not the most important. God's first, family second, career third. But it is a big part. So think about, what do you want to do? And, there's a lot of continuums in life. One of them's, if you look at on this end of the continuum, it'd say make the most money you can. Now, really, that's consume the most you can. You want the biggest house, biggest car, newest wife or husband or whatever. The other end of the continuum is make the biggest impact on the world you can. And there's nothing wrong with making money as long as you're putting the impact right. And so think about, where do you want to be? If you want to be over here and just have consume the most you can of the resources of the world and other people, it's a choice you should consciously make, not just stumble into it. A lot of people mistakenly think that's the American dream, and that never was the American dream. But some people still function that way. The other end of the spectrum, maybe it's Mother Teresa over here that's willing to give up everything. And you're probably somewhere in between, but make a choice. And you really need to make the choice now. Where do you want to be? Because that choice will drive the companies you decide to go to work for. Because there'll be a lot of companies out there, right now the economy's about the best it's ever been. So it's booming. So think about, do you want a company that's making a positive impact on the world or not? And there's a lot of ways to make a positive impact on the world. It could be just a company that does stuff like helps the environment. It could be a company that promotes your beliefs. It could be a company that, like I said, there's a lot of things that are really good. There's a lot of companies out there that are legal that still do bad things. You know, and what they're pushing and what products they're pushing are bad for the world. And do you really want to live your life where 30 years later you say, well, I spent my whole life trying to get people addicted to this, you know, that's bad for them. And you may say you don't care, hopefully not. Hopefully you say you care and you're going to go pick something that's going to move people in the right direction. But make it a conscious choice. Too many people getting their first job, they just look at the starting salaries and they think that determines it. Career's a marathon, not a sprint. Your starting salary is almost irrelevant. You know, it's really what is it long term? You know, what do you do? So think about that first. Pick a company that you can have a positive impact. Pick a company that fits your belief system. You know, I know a lot of people that have a job, you know, that they say, well, it's okay that I lie and cheat people because that's my job. You know, I've heard that from salespeople, I've heard it from lawyers, I've heard it from doctors, I've heard it from lots of people. You know, it's clearly, that's not biblical, so again, make your choice. You get to choose. You get to choose. It's up to you. I know all of those people too, I know salespeople, lawyers, doctors, everything else that are honest and help people too. So you can be both ways, but think a lot about where you're going. If you want to have a positive impact, I'm sure you do. And then when you get in your career, you know, one of the things I learned years ago, back in my 20s, was if you really want to share with people, there's just a few things you got to do. And it really is the same things you do here, it just looks slightly different. You know, the first thing you do is you earn the right. Earn the right to share. I've been real open about my faith for many, many years. In businesses where they'll say you can't be. But the way you earn the right, so anybody know, somebody tell me what's the way you think you earn the right? What does that mean?
Be involved in their life.
Be involved in their life, that's one thing. Show you really care. You know, the thing that Christ tells us again and again and again to do in the New Testament is to love people well. And there's such a lack of that across the world. And, you know, and I think the U.S. is probably as bad as any nation, worse than a lot. You know, love people well. There's not much more fun than loving people. You know, and you get to choose. You get to choose, and again, love is a choice. You get to choose to love your coworkers. You get to choose to love the people you work with. Choose to love them well. And so what do you think loving them well looks like? Anybody have some ideas? One is getting involved in their life, like you say. Be willing to listen to them and care. Encourage them. You know, one of the coolest names in the Bible, I think, is Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. You know, if you encourage people, that's you. Don't encourage them to do bad things. It's okay to not do that. But love them well. Your job's to love them, not to judge them. If they work for you, your job may be to judge their work. But it's not to judge. Tell them the truth. You know, because, you know, that's what we're called to do also. So number one, earn the rights, love people well. Number two is do your job really well. The Bible says do everything you do for the glory of God. You know, and your job is that way too. If you go into your job and do it the best you possibly can every day, you'll develop a huge positive name for you, and people will start saying, you know, what's different about Fred or Sally or whatever? Why are they so different? They work hard and they do a good job and they do the right things. And that's one of the things I learned a long time ago. Those things is how you earn the right. Don't get, just like somebody said a minute ago, don't get caught up in the gossip. You know, don't get caught up in bad actions. You know, you're representing the king of the world, the king of the universe. And you want to represent that king well as you go in. And you want to go in, and when you put the name Jesus Christ on your chest and on your heart, you want to go be a representative of his. Not that you'll never mess up, we all do. But represent him well. So loving people well, working hard, doing your job well, whatever it is. Do it to the best of your abilities. You know, my dad graduated high school in 1941. Spent the next 4 years on a PT boat in the Pacific. And very introverted guy, came back and, obviously had a pretty crazy life for 4 years and very, like I said, very quiet, genius level, but started college real quick after he got out, but didn't go very far and loved to fix things. So he always did facilities maintenance. And he was really good at what he did. And he'd bring the manuals home and read them and study them. So I just thought that's what everybody did. So when I got my first job out of school, that's what I did. I brought the manuals home and read them and studied them. And it's funny, pretty soon, even though I was like 23 years old, I was an expert on a whole lot of stuff. And so again, it's your choice. You can choose to do your job well, or you can choose to go into a job and just wait till people spoon feed you. So do your job well. That's how you earn the right. The other thing you do is get on the front lines. That's what happens with many people after school. They get off the front lines. Some of them have been in a great program like this here. And why you're going together as a group, and it's way more fun to go into battle as a group and have all your friends supporting you. But you can get on the front lines and get groups there, and it's, one here, there's a lot of different ones. I do Beautiful Feet Ministries is one of the things in Fort Worth. It's a homeless ministry, and it's a place you can get on the front lines. I go to prison a lot too, that's where I'm at, Kyle's future in-laws and stuff, and so. When you get on the front lines, one of the things you do, first place, God called us to be on the front lines, so you're doing what he tells us to do. Second place, you get a chance to love a whole bunch of people really well. I tell many people I get more hugs at Beautiful Feet than I get anywhere else in my whole life. So it's, but also, people are interested in hearing, why are you on the front lines? Why are you out there? I led an undercover team for a couple of years rescuing girls that were taken by human traffickers. And we rescued a lot of women and a lot of girls. And it's, but as you get on the front line, what happens is you get war stories that are true war stories that show God's grace. And there's always so many of them that show God's grace, because there's situations you get into that God's amazing on how you get through them. But you earn a right to tell a story many times. And as people start hearing your stories, as people realize you're in prison and you're not just in the chapel, but you're in the cell blocks and you're on, in solitary and maybe on death row and places like that, everybody wants to hear about it. I've learned I can get on an airplane and be sitting in the middle of the aisle and say something like, I got out of prison Saturday. Everybody around me is paying attention to that, so especially the people that are between me and the aisle, or over on the window that can't get past me. But you start developing a captive audience. When we sold my last organization to the first company, it was a Swedish company, and the CEO had asked me to come up to New York to talk to him. He flew over from Sweden, and I flew from here to New York, and we met. We had this 3-hour conversation. I'm going to give you a really short version of the 3 hours. But we start the 3 hours, and Arna was his name, and Arna, the first thing he said was, I understand you're a Christian. And I said, yes. And then he said, and I understand you're really open about your faith. Or he didn't say your faith, but you tell people about it all the time. And I said, yes. And he said, well, you can't do that anymore. And I said, well, Arna, you've got the right to fire me. That's okay. But my first loyalty is to Jesus Christ. So I'm going to talk about Jesus. But it's okay if you fire me, because he's put me under your authority, and you can make that call. And, which totally surprised him, I think, when I came from that angle. But I didn't really want to get fired. It's never have been fired in my life, so didn't want to, still haven't been. But anyways, I said, you can fire me if you want. And he said, well, no. He said, I don't want to fire you. He said, we just got to have you quit talking about Jesus. And so, anyway, finally, about 30 minutes into the conversation, he's like, well, you got to understand how anti-Christian I am. And he's from Sweden. They consider themselves a post-religious society. And he said, in my family, the firstborn son of the extended family has been a Lutheran priest until me since the 1600s. And he said, I broke that chain. He said, I'm more anti-Christian than probably anybody you've ever met. And I said, well, it's okay, you can fire me. You know. And another stage in there, he said, well, I can't fire you. He said, your organization puts up better numbers than any division in the combined company. I said, well, maybe you ought to have me share my faith with everybody. They don't put up good numbers. It'd be good. Anyway, ended 3 hours, I didn't get fired. He was a little frustrated probably. But, you know, a couple of years later, 2 or 3 years later, I was in Malmö, Sweden, and I was eating supper with he and his family at their home, and I had he and his wife and his 2 kids that were like 16 and 20. And they wanted to hear about prisons in the U.S., and so I can talk a lot about prisons, been in a lot of them. And I got to share the whole gospel with the whole family, and they asked good questions, and they were very interested, and, you know, it brought the walls down. But it brought them down because I continued loving them. I earned the right by doing my job well and doing everything well, but I loved on them. I didn't judge anybody with where they stood. And, you know, I don't know if any of them ever came to Christ. They didn't that night, but, you know, it's amazing if you just do those things. So love people well, earn the right by doing a great job and doing it really well. And get on the front lines where you've got war stories to tell, because everybody wants war stories. You know, one of the stories I've told someone about prison, there's tons of prison stories I can tell. There's tons of other stories. But, you know, one of the times I was outside the fence in Bonham prison, and this guy walked up to me, about 400 pounds and about 6'5", 6'6", so a pretty good sized guy. Shaved head, white guy, big white guy, about late 30s, prison tats all over him. He walks up to me outside the fence and comes up and he said, you talked to me in prison 3 years ago. Now, we're not in prison, we're outside, but he says, at this stage, I don't remember him, but I talked to lots of people. He said, you talked to me in prison 3 years ago. And I said, okay. And he said, I just want to say thank you. He said, I was a gang enforcer for an Aryan gang before that, you know, and of course, you know, he didn't have to explain what all that meant. He killed people, he hurt people, he did lots of bad things. And he said, and I came to Christ, and it's turned my life around. And he said, I'm out now, I've been out for a year. And he said, 3 months ago, my pastor asked me to give my testimony from the pulpit, and he said, I broke down and cried like a baby. And he said, I just want to say thank you. You know, and I could tell 1,000 stories like that. And it's from being on the front line and just God being gracious and God being there. And it's all God's stories. It's not mine. I'm just willing to do it. And so, but those stories is what earns you the right too, because everybody will listen to those kind of stories. And you can do stuff like put it on Facebook. Anybody wants to add on Facebook with me, feel free. You know, Ben is, Kyle is, I mean, there's probably other people too, but a lot of people you know probably aren't. Hootie is, Gary is, but, you know, I put a lot of the stuff I go because I want to get prayer, but it's also because many of the people that are Facebook friends of mine are across the world in some countries that are closed to the gospel, and many others, and the things they need to see is Christians loving people well. You know, that's why Christ said, you know, don't hide our candle under a bushel basket. It wasn't for our glory, it's for His. So, you know, real quick, a few other things. One of the things, when I was coming out of school, I was trying to pick a company, and I came out during a recession, and, you know, anyway, I had a lot of job offers, and I was trying to figure out which company to go to work for. And I knew not to look at the first dollar offer as the main thing, because I knew that takes care of itself. So that part I knew. Lots of things I didn't know, but I knew that part. But I didn't know the most important thing to look for. And the most important thing to really look for is the culture of an organization. And I wouldn't have known what that meant when I was y'all's age. And culture is not do they hang a bunch of fancy paintings on the wall, or what kind of music they play or don't play. The culture is what it's like. Are they ethical or are they unethical? Do they make a positive impact on the world? Do they promote bad things? You know, do people there care about each other? You know, some company cultures, and I've met with lots of top executives across the world, and one guy that ran a multi-billion-dollar international organization one time, was giving me some advice, and he said, Wes, this one, I was about 20 years younger, and he said, Wes, he said, your problem is you think people are important. And I said, Jim, I'm always going to be that way. He said, no, you're going to be just like the rest of us. People are just a number. They're not important. And most companies think that way. People aren't important. They're just a number. I had another one, Brian, that used to like to say, people are just like a cog on a gear. You can break one off and throw it away. You can buy another one tomorrow. Another one, Arna actually liked to say, tell his executives, forget your families. He'd say, forget your families. You can see them when you retire. You know, and again, there's a lot of cultures like that. A lot of cultures intentionally try to build the most stress they can in their employees because they feel like you do more. But the reality is, and again, you may like a culture like that, it's your choice, but figure out what you're looking for in a culture and find a place like that, because there's great cultures out there. They're just harder to find. And the way you tell a culture is not reading their website and not even listening to the HR person who's telling you about it. But when you go visit the company, and figure out a way to go visit a company before you accept the job. I know a lot of them like to do, you know, video interviews and stuff, but you really want to see what it's like. What are the people like? You know, as you walk around, if the boss walks by, are people glad to see him, or they kind of cringe or get uptight, you know? Do you see people that are enjoying themselves and having fun, or people that are just stressed out all the time? Because you can see culture when you walk around. So culture number one, and part of culture is, are they having a positive impact on the world? I know, like with Ideal Impact, you know, number one, we spread Christianity throughout the world because we've created over $1 billion for Christian ministries. We've also created in total $1.26 billion right now for ministries and schools. And we go into schools as a Christian ministry. You know, another part of impact is, obviously we have a huge impact on the environment. The energy we save the energy is how we create this money, but the energy we save would be more than taking the city of Southlake off the electrical grid permanently. You know, so it's a lot. It's not a little bit. I mean, and then I could go into a lot of other things. We grow people really, really well. And, you know, I felt like God, one of the visions God gave me when we were starting this was the ark. And that's like, I don't know what you're talking about, God. I'm kind of slow. He's got to tell me 3 or 4 times wrong. And so, but really what he was meaning was everybody that comes here is going to be here for a time. And it may be for 3 months if they're an intern. It may be for 4 years. It may be for 20 years. Our job is to grow them spiritually, personally, and professionally in all 3 of those areas so that they leave stronger than they came. And that's one of the jobs God gave us, and that's our culture. We grow people really, really well. The other thing I did know I wanted in a company was opportunity. So I absolutely knew I wanted opportunity. Didn't have a clue how to see it, and so I would ask every company, do you have great opportunity? And everybody said yes. And so I'm thinking somewhere along the way I'm not getting the right answer. So I was talking to an executive VP in a Fortune 150 company in Florida, and I said, do you have great opportunity? He said, yes. And I said, how would I know? And he looked at me for a minute, he looked me right in the eye, and he actually told me the truth. He said, I don't know. I'm thinking, great, you don't know, I'm probably in trouble. You know, when I sold my last company, we sold to one company, sold to a bigger company. And one of the challenges at the bigger company was after dividends, we had an extra $1 billion a year we needed to do something with. Which, if you're going to have a problem, it's a good problem to have. You know, so I spent half the time running my division and half the time doing M&A and due diligence work across the world and help buying companies. And so I got to analyze lots and lots of companies. And what I found was, if you find the answers to 3 questions, you can nail opportunity. It's really easy to see. It's 3 questions. And the first one of those is, you know, you want to see what their financial results look like for the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, even better. And what you want to see is a curve that goes up pretty much consistently. A lot of companies are flat. You know, they grow with inflation and that's all. And if so, if they grow with inflation, they don't need to promote anybody. because unless somebody leaves or dies, they don't have higher openings. You know, some are declining in their hire people, and the worst case are the unstable ones. A lot of businesses are inherently unstable. All consulting firms are unstable. In recessions, they all collapse at the same time. They lay off a bunch of people, and now you're a consultant and you can't get a job. So, or you work for a consulting firm. Oil and gas has been unstable forever since it first started being a business. Telecommunications since it deregulated. So the unstable companies normally pay the highest on first offers because you're not going to be there too many years. And then you're all going to get laid off at the same time. And so their curve, if you look at 10 years or so, curves up and down like this. I mean, and if you're in a firm like whether it's a lawyer firm, marketing firm, whatever, that normally works with consulting companies, their curve's going to look the same way. They're going to be hiring and laying off regularly. So think about that. So you look for the company with the growth. That's number one to nail opportunity. They need to be growing well consistently. Second thing on opportunity is what do they do to develop you? Most companies do this really, really poorly. I was asked to present at the American Electronics Association CEO Institute, I don't know, a few years back. They brought in 3 people they thought were global experts in growing people and growing companies. And so we got this big room full of CEOs, and there's 3 of us talking. And the first guy does his presentation, then I do mine, and the third guy stands up and he says, I'm not going to give my presentation. And we all thought he was kidding, because all these CEOs paid money to hear the 3 of us talk. But he said, my numbers don't compare to what you just saw from Mr. McDaniel, so I'm just going to sit back down. He did. He wouldn't give his presentation. But we average over 100 hours training per person per year. We're trying to grow people really well. But the American Electronics Association, looking at member companies, they find, and this is a high-tech industry, they find that most of them train people about 1 day a year on the average. And you can't even keep up, much less get ahead if you're not getting trained. So that's the second thing on opportunities for development. The third thing is, do they promote from within? And if you can't ask a company that, everybody says, yes, we do. It's kind of like saying, do you have opportunity? But the reality, it's a culture. As you meet people at the higher levels, how many of those grew within the company? And how many did they bring in from other companies? If all their partners came from somewhere else and all their managers came from somewhere else, they probably don't grow people well. So anyway, think about getting the answers to those questions too. So you're looking at culture, you're looking at impact, you're looking for a place that fits your faith well. And there's great companies out there that it's just, the thing is, it's not this many, it's this many. And look for those well. And so anyway, that was what I had to say. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Right now I'm struggling through I could after graduation I could work for a company, make a good amount of money, I have plans of I can donate this from what I'm making, I can't wait, But I also struggle with do I want to stay in a company? Am I really going to use this money wholesome? Or do I want to work for a company that's not-profit? It's I have opportunities at both, but at the same time, how do I feel? How do I choose from that? Because I don't want to feel I picked the wrong one through the money detail.
Yeah, the first money is almost irrelevant. Because the reality, so they pay $10,000 more a year or whatever, that's really not much in the scheme of things. The career is what counts. And so I would ignore first dollars. And I mostly did coming out of school. I didn't go to work for the highest offer I had because I didn't know all this that I just told y'all just then, but I knew I wanted to have a positive impact on the world. And I knew that I needed to grow and develop. And so what I would look at is how good are they at growing and developing you. And I don't worry too much nonprofit, for-profit. We're a for-profit ministry. So, and that's the way God called me to do it. So, but that part I don't worry about, but what do they do to develop people? Because if they don't develop people well, you're going to, 3 years from now, you may be less valuable than you are today. So that's what I would look at first. And then, do they conflict with any of your values or stuff? And sometimes you'll have a marketing company or whatever that they seem okay, but they have you working, promoting their customer stuff who's really bad stuff a lot of times. So what else? What other questions? Yeah.
Going off the financial records, is there like a term you could look up at Google just to pull those up?
Yeah, what you can do, so if they're publicly traded,
It will reflect their selling.
it will be, yeah, well, I wouldn't look at their stock because stock kind of fluctuates with the market. But what you're trying to get is what their total sales numbers have been for the last 10 years.
Okay.
And it won't be a perfectly linear curve, but it should be progressively up.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean they won't ever have one dip, but you want to see something that's growing. Now, if they're a private company, I would ask them for those numbers before I go to work for them.
Yeah.
And if they won't tell you, I don't know, I probably wouldn't go to work for them personally. But, because I feel like if they're trying to keep that secret, that's kind of scary. What's wrong with it?
Yeah. Something you want to write about.
Yeah. So, what else? Okay, well, I'll hang around a few minutes, so if anybody wants to come ask me something, feel free. And
Here's a question to consider.
Okay.
What's for y'all? Like, what's one thing that you're maybe just nervous about transitioning from college to a job?
let me add a thing or two that may help on those lines.
Yeah.
One of the things, too many companies, and to me this is a giant red flag. If the company, if you're going to work for a company where you can only get promoted by moving to different cities, that's a really huge red flag. Because most of y'all probably plan on getting married, I'm assuming. If you plan on getting married and you or your spouse are working for a company like that, the other one has to constantly give up their career and start over. And so it becomes a big deal. But there's a lot of companies out there that will say, doesn't mean you won't sacrifice and you won't work hard and stuff like that, but if you're required to move a lot, that's a big deal. Be really careful. Your worst situation, in the United States, the reality is companies are really bad. Most companies, we're not, but most companies are really bad at hiring college students. And part of it's the way they do it's really bad. You know, recruiters really are salespeople. They don't know how to hire people. Hiring college students in the U.S., 80% of U.S. college students fail on their first job. 80% fail on their first job.
What does that mean?
That means 80% of them will not last 2 years. They're going to be gone before 2 years is up. And the bad part, when that happens, you're in one of a few areas. One of the worst things is you fail on your first job, you're living in a city you don't want to live in. Because what you find is when you're graduating, companies will come from other cities to see you, or they'll fly you, or they'll do whatever. But let's just say you want to live in Dallas-Fort Worth, and you take a job in Detroit, and then you fail on it for one reason or another. Nobody from Dallas-Fort Worth is going to look at a resume from somebody in Detroit. Because it's more expensive, more trouble, more of a pain in the rear. So why look at it? There's 8 million people living here. Why worry about a resume from Detroit? And so getting back to where you want to be is really hard. A lot of companies there say, well, come with us, we're going to put you in this training program, then we're going to move you to a city. I would give a lot of thought before I was willing to do that, because that's probably one that you can only move around the world. So if you've screwed up and you got in a city you don't want to be in, you're in one of 3 situations. And the first situation is, you figured out it's a bad deal and you're looking for a job, and they hadn't quite figured it out yet, but you're looking for a job and you can't really get back because nobody wants to talk to you. Second situation is not quite as bad, is they've figured out it's a bad deal, so they fire you, and it happens to coincide with the time of your apartment lease running out, so you at least got a little more freedom. Again, you're in a bad situation, you have no income, you don't get unemployment if you get fired. And so now you're sitting there, you have no income, you have no nothing, you've got bills to pay and whatever. But luckily your lease is run out and you move. The worst one, which almost always happens, is they figure out it's a bad deal, and maybe it's not that you're bad, they just put you in the wrong position. They put you over here as a project manager, and really you'd be a great marketing person, but they stuck you in the wrong department. So they decided it's a bad deal. And they fire you, and you're living in Detroit, and you've got 6 months left on your apartment lease, and now you're in a city you can't even find a job, and you don't want to live in, and you're just stuck. You know, so be really careful about being moved to a city you don't want to be in. You know, and if you do move, work really hard initially to find community to plug into. You know, if you're still in this area, it's less hard because you know people. But if you go to wherever, you know, if it's another city, you probably don't know anybody. Find community fast and find the right kind of community fast. Right? If not, you can have a pretty miserable existence. So, I don't know if that helped any on your thought processes or whatever. So.
Anything else, you know, nervous about or thinking that's been on your mind?
Something that I've been thinking about, I know for myself, like getting right out of high school, going to college, 4 years, for, you know, supposedly 4 years of my life it's planned out. It's been 4 years so far, but it's difficult for me to like maintain vision moving forward because there's a lot of moving variables and a lot of what ifs, and you know, first and foremost is self-sufficiency. And so it's, I don't know, I mean, what was that like, you know, exiting your 12 years of education and starting a professional?
Yeah, really more than 12 years because you got college and school and everything else.
Right.
Hey, you know, it's a crazy time for everybody. Myself, I didn't have a clue what a professional job looked like. Yeah, I really didn't have a clue. And, you know, I designed pacemakers right when I got out of school, you know, pacemakers for the heart. And, you know, the good side, I work for a company that's having rapid growth. The bad side is they didn't really develop people at all.
Yeah.
Now they only hired like the top 1 or 2 engineers from about 10 different schools. So everybody that was hired with me was, you know, top 1 or 2 graduates also. So it's a bunch of good people there, or at least intelligent people, I don't know, good, studious, whatever. You know, I knew, I'm a natural introvert actually. So, but I knew a culture was important, and I kind of lucked out into one of the guys that graduated from Purdue at the same time, ended up in the same apartment complex with me. There was another engineer there, and then, you know, I just started building things because that's what I do, build things. So, and so we ended up with a lot of friends and stuff. The other thing that was weird on the company is it turned out it was partly controlled by the mafia. And so the CEO got taken out in a contract killing 6 months in, and FBI, you know, it was way entertaining. I decided there's probably a better way to make a living. That part I hadn't quite counted on, but you know, I end up with a lot of entertaining situations in life. But yeah, but it is a crazy time, and that's why. Look for the culture. I mean, if you look for impact and culture first, that solves a lot of stuff, because if you can find a company that has the right culture, one thing is, and they're good at growing people, so they have the opportunity side too. What happens is you go in a place where they already know how to grow people, and they already understand you're coming in as an unknown, and they've got a plan. Like when Ben started with us, there was a plan, a real definite plan. And, you know, and like with everybody that does, everybody starts with a really definite plan. Here's what you do, and here's how you go. And like we let people start the training before they get there if they want to. It's pretty unusual there. But if you don't check those things, if you don't understand the culture, you could end up in an organization that's way different than anything you want to be involved with. And hiring and recruiting is one side, they're selling you, but when you get there, you may find something totally different. And it is a big transition. And it's, you know, one of the things you think about when you come here, your life's in these certain segments. And so when you have an apartment lease, unless you just drop out of school, you know, or get flunked out, I guess. But you know, it's all kind of coinciding, it works together. But after this, your life is not built on those same segments. And so you could get a, you know, your apartment lease or whatever, and you're living in some city and, like I said, all of a sudden be unemployed. And it really is, most companies in the U.S. are horrible at being able to hire college students. And that's why so many of them all of a sudden end up in a bad situation. It's, but really look at that. Look at how, you know, it's what you should see when you go on an interview. You ought to see a lot of people first your age and 1 year older and 2 years older and 3 years older and 4 years old, so on. I had a friend of mine was getting out of school, going to work for 3M, and he was telling me it's the greatest thing in the world, tremendous opportunity. He said everybody there is in their 40s and 50s. And I said, what happened to all the people in their 30s and 20s? And he said, well, that's why there's such great opportunity. There's nobody between here. I said, but hadn't they hired people out of school for the last forever? And I said, where'd they all go? You know, so obviously there's a disconnect going here. So, I mean, when you see those things, that's what you should see. When you walk around, you ought to see people your age and close to it and just a little older and a little older. And what you're hoping to see is two people in management roles and team leader roles that are a little bit older than you. Because if everybody in a manager role is 40 or 50, yeah, it probably means they aren't good at growing people. You know, they only can do that hiring people from outside. You know, if you choose well, that first choice, it's not that it's not recoverable, it's just harder. It's easier to choose well the first time. You know, the second time it's harder. Talk to people there, understand what it's really like. It's one of the most important buying decisions you make, picking which company you go to work for. And hopefully you positioned yourself well. And like, don't get us tied into first offer. Get tied into, you know, what does a long-term career look like? And will you come out stronger whenever it is, a few years later, 10 years later, 40 years later? I don't know if that helps any, but it's an important time. You know, so.
Finding a good culture is important. I've been fortunate in the first 2 jobs I've had out of college have been at Wesley's company and here, both of which have excellent cultures. And as you're becoming self-sufficient, you know, like you're on your own, you know, every decision's on me. Like having a good culture at your job just helps you be able to function and figure out how a 401k works, you know, and like just all, you know, all the other just stuff that gets thrown on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, great places like to help you,
Yeah.
you know, because they love people well. And I think that's what great companies do, is love people well. And you know, again, they're harder to find. And, you know, and then you get the advantage of, you've got people that, you know, not only 2 and 3 years older to get wisdom from, but people that are 10, 20 years older to get wisdom from. So it's huge.
Yeah. Does your company offer tuition reimbursement?
You know, we don't do tuition reimbursement.
Okay.
But, you know, we do grow people really well. And we've got the unusual thing of a ladder program which is really unique. But when people come in with us, they all start at the same level and they can get promoted as fast as they can get promoted. Like Garrett Jones, some of y'all may or may not know him, but Garrett came in and Garrett got his first promotion in 3 weeks. And he got his second one 2 weeks later. So he had told his grandmother about his first promotion, and then he was over at her house like 2 weeks later. He said, I got promoted again. She said, yes, Garrett, you already told me. He said, no, I got promoted a second time. You know, and she said, so what did you get, a quarter raise? He said, no, it's like 40% raise of the 2 times together. You know, and that's twice in 5 weeks. But the Bible talks about being faithful with a little, you should get a chance to be faithful with more. And it says that a whole bunch of times. You know, Matthew 25 is a great example, of course, and it talks about the last guy who buried his in the ground, its talent in the ground where it wasn't used, got thrown in the darkness where there's a bunch of weeping and gnashing of teeth, which sounds like a really bad place to hang out, you know, personally. So, you know, but the opportunities are good. It's just really looking for them hard.
Yeah.
And like I said, look for the companies that really grow people well and have the culture. And if you find them, they're worth their weight in gold. And the rest of it take care of itself.
What else? Anything else, mind?
Yeah.
So let's say if you're going to start working for company A,
Mhm.
and they don't meet all these expectations or qualifications more so, what's an appropriate amount of time to fit in to get what experience you can from that position and then move on?
It starts getting hard. The big deal is if you mess up the first time, and again, 80% of college graduates will, so high percentage y'all will. You can do the right things and your odds go way up on winning, but it's on you. Don't trust the companies to make wise decisions, because most of them don't. There's a few that do. But then, so you get in and you're just totally blown it. And you end up, or maybe you 80% blown it, and you've gotten a situation that's just a bad situation. Like I said before, I'm a little socially awkward, so peer pressure has never really impacted me much, so I wasn't ever good at, if they wanted me to do things I didn't think I should do, I just didn't do them. So it worked out because I've got good enough results. But if you get one of those, I would say you're never forced to do immoral or illegal things. You allow them to push you into it, but they can't really force you to do it. So if you're not in that boat, what I would do is try to stay and learn, try to see if you can stick it out for a year, unless you've got this tremendous opportunity. But what happens there, the next time it's more important. If you blow it once, that's one thing. If you blow it twice, all of a sudden, some companies are not looking at your resume anymore because they're saying, okay, they're moving twice already in a short period of time. If you blow it 3 times, when we get a resume that's the person's on their 3rd job and, last 8 or 10 years, and they're looking for another job, and we probably don't even look at the resume. Because at some stage you feel like the person's they may be a great person and making bad choices, but they're probably going to continue those bad choices. It's kind of like somebody's been through several divorces, start thinking, okay, so why do I want to take a chance? So that's what happens to you, is that second choice gets more important because you start building a pattern of bad choices. And if you look at dollars first, you're going to make bad choices. Forget the dollars. The reality is, they should have a plan where you get the decent dollars, but the first dollars are way less important because, my first job, I ended up, after the tail section of the helicopter got blown off with an explosion there, and the FBI locked down the plant, I was there another couple of months and I left. That was about a year into it, so I was about a year there, and then my next job, I knew then, I'd been an engineer and I'm pretty good at engineering, but I really felt like I needed to go into sales because I needed to get better at dealing with people. And so I went into sales and I figured I'd be terrible at it. And I didn't do most of the standard things salespeople in that industry did, but it turned out I was actually pretty good at it because I tried to help the clients win. And so I stayed there for 8 years, and then I started my first organization. So I didn't have this problem of this, and really I wrote a resume coming out of college, and I never rewrote a resume. So, and I didn't know how to write one coming out of college. They didn't really teach us in engineering back then, and of course we didn't have word processors, we did have a typewriter. So they said, put the awards you won and stuff like that. Well, they didn't tell me don't start with elementary school, so it's like, so I started with 5th grade. So I didn't really know how to make a resume, but it all worked out good anyway. And then later, the only time I ever pulled out a resume, I added 1 page to it, so it went from 7 pages to 8 pages. But it was just you know, if you do well in the industry, you develop a name for yourself, and you don't really need things like resumes. They're just, you know, so, and that's still true today. That hasn't changed. So make a good choice the first time. If you blow it the first time, really work hard to make a good choice the second time. And the best way, don't get yourself in a desperate situation. Really look at it. Look at the gaps. Look at those things I've talked about, and you know, and on opportunity and culture, because there are companies out there that are good. It's just finding them. So what else?
I have another one.
Sure.
You've interacted with a lot of companies, like bigger companies, I assume.
I've been what?
You've interacted with a lot of bigger companies, I assume.
Been tracked with?
Interacted.
Oh, interacted with, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, lots of them across the world.
Which ones have stuck out as the best, like maybe your top 5?
You know, if you get the giant companies,
Yeah, because it can be hit.
a lot of them are really not good at all.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really, the one I sold my last organization into, for a giant company, I think is pretty good. It's Snyder Electric. But so out of giant companies, Jean-Pascal Turcotte, their CEO, is a friend of mine, and you know, he's really solid. The problem is they have 180,000 employees across 180 countries, so they have lots of different cultures scattered through the company. But I think out of big ones, they're pretty good. But I could probably name 100 bad ones for one that's kind of semi-okay. But, you know, so, you know, I think a lot of times, the sad part, all of them have gone to the numbers games just about, where people don't matter. And so I really think it's more the medium-sized ones where you can maybe find some of the great things, and that's even gotten hard, you know, at this stage. So I wish I was more help than that. Yeah.
It is helpful.
Yeah. So what else? Okay. Like I said, I'll still hang around a little bit. If anybody wants to come ask me a question, feel free. And Ben knows how to get a hold of me, and Colin knows how to get a hold of me, and you know, so.
Yeah. Can we say thanks to Wes?